So in Matthew 2, we have King Herod trying to inquire about the whereabouts of Jesus. And what he does is he has a bunch of children killed right around the time when Christ was born. And what we are to make of that is quite simply this great war and this battle that has been going on since even before humanity's fallen to sin. We see God creating everything in Genesis 1. At the very end of Genesis 1, he says it's very good. The heavens, the earth, all the rulers of all the realms, in the sea and the air, on the land. And then humanity is the pinnacle of God's creation. In the image of God, he creates Adam and Eve. And then, of course, there's an issue in the spiritual realm because we see Satan tempting Eve to sin, deceiving her. And then Adam sins, and they fall, and they're naked, and they're ashamed, and they're hiding from, next thing you know, they're hiding from God. And God comes to him in his grace and promises the Messiah, as we heard, of course, through Abraham and David. But the first promise was to Adam and Eve, that there would be an offspring that would come from the woman, but that yet there would be enmity between the offspring of the woman and the offspring of the serpent, and they would be at war with each other. And we've seen that really throughout the Old Testament scriptures. We experience it today, but you see it really at fever pitch here in Matthew 2. Herod's trying to kill Jesus. He wants his earthly power and authority, and yet Satan doesn't want people to be saved from their sins. He wants to squash out the Emmanuel, the God dwelling with sinners. He wants to try to thwart God's kingdom and God's plan of new creation. And so what you see Joseph and Mary doing is fleeing. It's almost like in Jesus, of course, is the second Adam, but he's the true Israel. And you see very similar aspects here in the first 4 or so 5 chapters of Jesus, of Matthew here, that you do in the life of Israel. And in Israel, you see, of course, God's people being harshly treated in Egypt. You see the command from Pharaoh to have the children killed. Jesus is attempting to be murdered by Herod. You see, of course, God's people crossing a Red Sea. And Jesus is baptized by John. And then what do people do after they cross the Red Sea? God's people, they go into the wilderness. And what do? They grumble against God. They murmur against God. They murmur against Moses. They wander. They stray. And we see Jesus, of course, is after he's baptized, is ushered out into the wilderness. And he's tempted by Satan in a very unique way. And I want to look at really the last temptation. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me." Is that true or not? I guess that's the question. Remember Jesus in his encounter with the Jews in John, I think it's John 8. He's talking about how, if Abraham was your father, you would do what Abraham did. You'd believe in me. You'd look to me. But Abraham's not your father. Your father's the devil. And the devil speaks lies. Lies are his native tongue. And so the devil's temptation to Jesus is, of course, lies. It's filled with lies. The devil can't give Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he wants worship. He wants devotion. He wants Jesus to bow down. And of course, what does Jesus say? You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. That's the first command, right? Have no other gods before me. And Jesus is faithful, unlike Israel of old, unlike Adam. Remember, the language is that he worshipped his belly. He wanted to eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He ushered in death. Jesus is the only one that worships the Lord and serves the Lord all the time, without exception and without fail. And he does that all completely for us. And not only does he do that for us, he actually empowers us to worship God, to love God, to honor God. And we don't do that perfectly. We fail when tempted, when tested. And yet here in Matthew 1 through 4, we have one in Jesus who is coming to enter in and to love and to be faithful in all the ways that Adam wasn't, in all the ways Israel blew it, in all the ways you and I blow it. And we must look to him. The one who lived on the word, every word that came from the mouth of God, the one who never put God to the test, the one who worshiped God and served him only. as one of us. That is the Jesus who is on the scene here in Matthew 4. And so when you see him overcoming Satan, it's a great thing. Israel didn't do it, Adam didn't do it, you and I don't do it, but Jesus does it for us and for all of God's people who look to him. He is their faithful Savior, the one who would crush the serpent's head. Delivers a preliminary blow here. In Luke's gospel, we read the devil left him until an opportune time. And that opportune time, of course, is later in his life and his ministry, and certainly on Good Friday. So I encourage you to tune in to our Good Friday service. We'll post that Friday, and we'll see how the devil and all his minions are zeroing in on Christ. One last hurrah, and Jesus overcomes, not with great power and might, but in the utmost humility, in his suffering, in his weakness as he pursues the cross and goes to the cross and gives himself up unto death, knowing that he would be raised again for all who look to him. Be blessed.